I'll be your instructor for this class. My name's Terry Calloway. I am a certified flight instructor, also an advanced ground instructor for the FAA written test. I will be teaching you both through presentation and also through textbook. We'll be using the Gleim textbook. April 25th, I've got it listed as a practice exam. Now, do you remember at the beginning of the semester when we started, I said we'll give 2 final exams. We'll give you one, and if you pass that, you don't have to take final on finals week. That's that exam. Okay? That is that exam. So I won't be here that day, and I'll have somebody sit in for it, deliver it. Somebody that's an aviator that can answer questions, and then all you'll have is a 60-question simulated FAA written exam. Standard weather briefing. That's if you've never called him before about this flight. Okay, so he's going to ask you if you don't answer one of these questions when you talk to him, he's going to ask you that question. So go ahead and use this standard format. The cool thing about the way flight and flight communications works is that you can get to where you can start to anticipate things. Remember we talked about when we're flying into a Class C, if we're flying VFR, we're not on a flight plan, we have to notify them when we're so far out before we enter the Class C. Well, there's a standard phraseology for what they're expecting you to ask and what they're expecting you to say. It's just like here when we call the briefer, there's a standard phraseology as well. And you get to where you kind of, even though you may not have done it before, you can start to become a professional pilot just by using the same phraseology. Because if you say it the way he's expecting it, he's going to give you a much better reply. He doesn't have to ask you a question. It doesn't tie up time. And talk time is evil on radio frequencies because remember, it's a party line. We're all sharing the same frequency. So talk time ties up the frequency, and we don't want to do that. After I got my private license and I started getting where I was flying around more often, and one of the things I would always do, say I was going into Springfield, is I would start listening to Springfield Approach long before I needed to talk to them. And first thing it allowed me to do is it allowed me to know where the traffic was because they're talking to him as they're going into it, right? They're talking to him. And also, I could see what the phraseology they were using to call in for him. And so when I got ready to speak, I would just say the same thing, except different plane, different end number, and different location, but using the same phraseology in the same order. Who I am, where I am, what I need, so to speak. That's what we're looking for there. Another thing you might ask for is an outlook briefing. That would be a briefing that you're really kind of wanting to find out, is the weather going to be good enough to go ahead and plan this flight. Plan to go and make this flight, but do I want to pull it out of the hangar or not? So you get an outlook briefing. This is before you ever leave home, go to the airport. You may get that 4 to 6 hours ahead of time. And then an abbreviated briefing will be provided when you request information to supplement data that you've already gotten in the standard weather briefing or update previous briefings, and then you want it to be limited information. 12. What would I put there? Fuel on board. They want to know how much fuel you have, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Alternate airports. Alternate airports are places that we plan to go to if for some reason we can't get to the airport we have of intended landing. Our destination of intended landing, let's just say, for example, the weather came in and it kept us from getting there. So we deviate to some other airport. That's what they want to know. Where else might we go? Okay? Other things that can keep it from happening is if for something they had something happened to damage the runway, or the runway became unusable and we couldn't land there. Even if it's too windy and you have too much crosswind for the airplane that we're flying, you may have to go to an alternate airport. So one with a runway that's more suited to the winds that are favorable for the airplane. Next thing. And then finally, the color of the aircraft. They want to know what color the aircraft is. And it may be 3 colors. It's all so you start it out with the primary color first. A lot of cases that's white, and then the trim colors like with green and gold. In our case, it's going to be Pitt State, so it'd be yellow and red, right? So white with yellow and red trim. Now, what is all this information about? This is everything they need to know to put you into the system, but also it's also everything they need. They can get information about you if you go missing. Why do they want to know how much fuel you have on board? Because when they start a search for you, think about how that works. So if we're going from Pittsburgh, Papa Tango Sierra, all the way across Missouri over here to St. Louis, then we know that we have about enough fuel to do that leg. So they have, how much area do they have to search for you? Well, if you have that much fuel plus enough to go another 45 minutes, plus 45 minutes, then that means that the area that they would search would be that big. So they don't know for a fact that you did go east. All they know is that you could have gone east. Your plan was to go east, and then they start looking for you that way. Then what's a pretty good thing about it is, though, is they look down this corridor first to try to find you, and then they start to broaden it like so. They don't really go backwards too much like that until they've really exhausted all the plan of finding you in this section here of where you might have gone. And having been in the Civil Air Patrol, I'm very familiar with the way this process takes, because we have done airplane searches looking for downed aircraft, and they are very hard to find, guaranteed, especially if they're small aircraft. Usually if they're large enough aircraft, somebody sees it go down. But there's a lot of wooded area between here and St. Louis, and then I can assure you it could be difficult to find. So that's what that is. That's the flight plan. Any questions? There you go.